So what I'll be talking about today is mostly the leadership principles of Amazon that I think a lot of you may have heard, seen, read in different places, and are really important at Amazon, and I think outside of Amazon. I'll try to explain a little bit why that is. So before introducing myself in a little bit more detail, I wanted to start with this pretty crazy number. 3,777 open product position at Amazon.com right now. I'm pretty sure that's actually an understatement because those are only the specific roles that are tagged to product managers, but there are other product manager jobs across Amazon, and that number is really, really big. And you might ask yourself, well, it goes across so many different, industries that Amazon is working on, so many different organizations, so many different products. Every role has its own different goals. What really put all these things together? Essentially, what are they all asking for? You would think there's nothing in common maybe, or maybe little in common, but the reality is that there's one thing in common, and it's actually Amazon leadership principles. So for those of you who don't know, Amazon doesn't have really an ordinary way of interviewing candidates, and this not only applies to product management candidates, but also to any role at Amazon. The way that Amazon hires is by essentially trying to raise the bar continuously on how its employees are essentially performing against Amazon leadership principles. So that means when you come in as a candidate or when you're evaluated at the end of the year for your performance, you're essentially being evaluated against 50%. Are you better than 50% of the people who are already doing that job? And the way to evaluate it is going through every single leadership principle and saying, well, how did you perform against that leadership principle? This is actually from Amazon's website as essentially an explanation of what are the leadership principles. And it looks a little bit weird, but it is true to understand that we do use them every day, right? You're not going to use a leadership principle every day. It's almost the unofficial language at Amazon, and is really sort of the glue that puts all the organizations together, all the different roles together. It's a way to communicate across Amazon and get your idea across, whether that is new ideas, solving problems, deciding on different approaches, etc. And another thing that, as sort of I alluded to, is that if you are, by the way, I do see some familiar faces here, but from my context, who here actually works at Amazon or have worked at Amazon? Okay, awesome. So you guys probably know, I don't know how many of you interviewed with Amazon, but we actually evaluate specific leadership roles in the interview. So if you go into an interview, the person sitting in front of you asking you questions have specific leadership roles that they're looking to get and understand whether or not you not just meet the bar, but again, raise the bar, meaning you're 50% better than someone who's already in that role at Amazon. So super interesting, super peculiar. The reason I'm talking about this is because I really do think that if you are able to master these leadership principles, you're going to be, although not sufficient, you're probably on your way to be like a really awesome product manager, or honestly just about any other role at Amazon. So a little bit about me. I've been at Amazon for 2 years and 2 weeks. Started in retail, work now in delivery technology for the past year and a half as in product management tech, which is super cool and interesting. Can't say too much about what I'm working on because we are still confidential, but happy to answer general questions if you may have. And super, super interesting. 2.5-time career transitioner. One time, so I should actually up this number because I was in the military, and then I was in operations, and then I moved to management consulting. And I did a short stint in med tech, and now I'm in product management. So I need to revise that number. I'll scrape it off for your PDF. And I'm a CPA, I'm an MBA. I don't code, but I am now building a two-pizza tech team and hiring a product team. The reason I'm saying that is just to show you that you don't, if you can really master these leadership principles and understand what they're about at Amazon or outside of Amazon, you can really, really go long ways. You don't need to be an engineer or a super, super technical person, which by no stretch of the imagination I am. And I was raised in a farm in the middle of nowhere, Israel. Really natural transition into product management at Amazon. That was a joke. And why product management? I really wanted to touch that because in my mind, product management is really, first of all, it's a really, really broad word, I think, at Amazon and outside of Amazon. And product management is really, in my mind, the heart of any good manager of any good company. I don't know of any company really that can't excel in product management, or any manager or leader that can't really understand product management, the core values of it, and not necessarily the technicalities that I'm sure some of you dive deeper into in some of these classes. I think it's a really, really fundamental skill. And I think that's why it's important. It's really, I think, driving not only companies like Amazon, but really any company. So that's why I decided to move towards product management in my career. Awesome. So LPs, that's an acronym. We really like acronyms at Amazon. LP is leadership principle. And you might ask, well, where can I use these leadership principles? I don't work at Amazon. I don't have an interview with Amazon, although you should if you can. Where would I use them? So yes, at Amazon in business decisions and product decisions, in performance and hiring decisions, but also outside of Amazon, can you use them? In my experience, I've seen more and more companies actually adopt these leadership principles as part of their way about going on making decisions. Some of them would admittedly say, some companies in Seattle that I've talked to is like, oh yeah, we're actually really like these ideas at Amazon, and we actually embrace some of them. Some of them you'll hear maybe different names. I don't think necessarily some of those leadership principles are really, inventing the wheel, but I think it's a really, really strong framework to think about business decisions, product management, and even your career development. And also in real life, I could definitely use all 14 leadership principles in over dinner. Yeah, another joke, not that great. Awesome. So I'll try to. What I'll do is I'll go through them and sort of give you my perspective, what they're about, how ideas on how to use them essentially in product management, and some of those in your career development as well. And if someone has any question, please raise their hands. Unless I feel like we're completely out of time, we'll try to take questions as we go. When do you prioritize one LP over the other? You'll notice that some of them might be a little contradicting. You don't know how and when to apply them. And so that really depends on multiple factors, right? Like business stage. It matters if the business is in growth phase or mature, and it's really time to think of creative ways to cut costs, for example. The product stage, are you right now in the ideation phase and you're sitting in front of a customer and you really need to understand and put yourself in the shoes of your customers? Or are you now doing UAT, which I think you guys know UAT. Are you guys now doing UAT and now it's really time to raise the bar in your tech team's performance? It also depends, on what your role is. Although I will say that at Amazon, there's a concept of general athletes that I personally really respect and appreciate. That means if you can really raise the bar on these leadership principles and you're in the company, that means that you're probably really, really talented and good at a number of different things, right? So maybe today it's product management and maybe tomorrow it's a finance manager or an operations manager on site. But it does matter what your role is. For example, deliver results you can imagine. That's a leadership principle that would really make sense in sales. At the end of the day, you have results that you need to deliver, whereas, for example, hire and develop the best, if you're a manager, that's going to mean much more than if you're an individual contributor. And then obviously, your goal and your environment, sort of back to what we talked about, what company do you work at? What team do you work at? What sort of values are respected and appreciated in that specific context that you're in? And I'll try to clarify some of those as we go. Perfect. So I'll start with customer obsession, which is really big at Amazon. I think you all know that. And a few things that I really wanted to know here. One is really like know your customer, right? It sounds a little bit obvious, but some people would say a customer is just the end customer that uses the product. It's external to the company, but no. Your customers can be internal. You can have many different customers. And the really number one thing is to understand your customer. When you're designing a product, sit down, think who your customer is. Write down your customer user stories. The other thing is engage with your customers at all levels. So it's not enough to read about your customer or ask your customer what they want. Sit in front of your customer, look at how they're using your product or how they're using the competitor's product. Understand why are they doing things a certain way? Are there things that are inferred that you think don't really make a lot of sense or could be improved upon? And the last thing is really focus on the customer and not the competitor, and find a way to deliver something that is maybe better, but maybe different, right? If you're only focused on delivering something that is better than your competitor, you're spending a lot of the time trying to think what the competitor is doing and outdo the competitor on things that are already there, defined, instead of thinking through what is it that your customer needs that your competitor has not even thought about. I'll give an example of sort of a question that can come as like a customer obsession leadership principle. How do you evaluate the customer experience of your product or service? So a good example would be everything that we just mentioned, right? Like trying to understand that your customer's frustrations without them needing to tell you exactly what those are. A bad answer is I sent a survey and I asked customers, do you like this feature or you don't like this feature? They can say yes, they can say no. Have you really learned everything about your customer experience? Have you really gotten all the data points that you need about what can be improved? What have you thought or not thought about? Probably not. Ownership. Ownership is a really, really big one at Amazon. Well, honestly, all of them are. I'm going to stop saying that. The number one thing here about ownership is scope. And can you drive high impact projects that are outside of your immediate responsibility, right? So if you, as a product manager, can come and show that you don't really just care about what's in front of you and what is being given to you, but are also constantly looking for ways to do more, deliver more, look around corners to deliver more value, that's going to make you like a huge, huge asset. It's not just for your company, for your customers as well. And then the other thing that comes out of here is really driving long-term value, right? Can you protect your customers and your company's best interest in the long run, even after you're not there, right? It's super easy to say, well, I'm the product manager right here, right now. I can have a really, really quick win if I just do X. But you know that in a year from now, you're either setting an expectation or delivering a product that's not going to scale, not going to work, and someone else would need to come back and clean that up. So that's really what this is about. And another sort of example is about a hard decision that you need to make to sacrifice short-term gain for something that would create a long-term value. So a good example of that would be essentially, for example, intentionally slowing down your product development process to make long-term trade-offs. For example, if you have 3 different businesses all asking you for somewhat of the same feature with different nuances and really, really trying to get you to do exactly what one team wants, and there are competing priorities, for you to slow down and say, you know what, actually, I'm not going to develop these features 3 different times. I'm going to intentionally slow down, understand how can I really deliver a product that can cater to all of those businesses' needs and can scale beyond to even use cases that you don't see right here, right now in front of you. That's a good example. A bad example is if you're trying to sacrifice a short-term gain for something that would create a long-term value, is, for example, making your team work longer hours to deliver both, right? That's not gonna work, not for a long time. And then a word of how you can use this principle in your sort of career development, product management. If you own your career path and you optimize for your long-term rather than your short-term growth, then ultimately you're gonna find yourself in a more challenging environment, right? So a good example for that is essentially making a career transition just for like a nicer role that might come with a less challenging environment, less growth opportunities, instead of really taking an opportunity that can really maximize your long-term career growth. Invent and simplify. Invent is really find a new way to solve a problem. Pretty simple. And simplify is really as simple as that sounds. Like, can you deliver the same value or result in a simpler way? It sounds really straightforward, but for those of you who have had some, product management experience, you'll find plenty and plenty of cases, probably more complex cases than simpler cases, where you sit down with maybe a UX designer or even a developer, and there's a super, super cool, complex way that to deliver a product. But then at the end of the day, simplifying and cleaning those things out and spending the time to simplify really makes a lot of difference in how your end product looks like. So it sounds, it's a little counterintuitive, but actually to simplify a product takes longer than to just write down and essentially develop whatever it is that you came up with at your first go. And a good example for like a complex problem to solve with a simple solution, I'll give you an example from my days at Amazon Retail. I was working on the fashion team, and essentially Amazon came up with a new way of sort of buying fashion products. So in the fashion industry today, if you go to fashion conferences, you would see buyers walking around in huge, huge conferences and trying to think through, okay, what color really hit it off last year? And you know what? Give me 200 of those and 300 of those. No data around it. A lot of time spent on guesstimating. A lot of ineffective processes coming out of it of inventory that is being sold out or inventory that is not being purchased because there's no real data around it, and it's been done the same way years and years and years and years. And Amazon came in and said, well, you know what? We're actually going to automate this entire thing, and we're going to catalog every single thing in your items, and we're going to be buying with patterns that we recognize and what customers need and want, and those patterns don't change materially year after year. In general, green is not really going to hit it off the stores if it wasn't doing really well the year before. R write a lot. This one is a little bit ambiguous, right? It's like, R write a lot. What does that mean? Am I expected to be like a magician that is write a lot? Like, how can I be write a lot? But there are really 3 key things here. One is judgment, which also sounds a little bit like magic show, but it's really about one, experience, and the second is the concept of one-way door, which is a really, really fundamental concept in product management. And I believe not just at Amazon. The concept of one-way door is essentially when you're going in and you're making a decision, you're developing a product, you're making a customer-facing decision. Is that decision reversible? Can you see it's not working and change your mind pretty easily and flip a switch, or can you not? So when you use judgment, you're able to think through what are the impacts of your decision in that context. The second thing here is diverse perspective. So no one's expecting you to know everything about everything and be the expert that is right all the time just because you were born perfect. But it's really about seeking for other people's perspectives, going to subject matter experts, understanding other perspectives than your own, maybe of people in your team, outside of your team, your customers, etc. And then the last thing I will say about write a lot comes also with the territory of being willing to essentially challenge the status quo. If you're accepting things as they are and not challenging the status quo, you're bound to be right when everyone else is right and wrong when everyone else is wrong. So being able to really critically think about the decisions that you're making, trying to look around corners for things is really the way to go. And a good example for that is a question like a time when you didn't have enough data to make the right decision. A good example for that is essentially not having essentially incomplete data, but going to subject matter experts or people on the team who would understand the data and the gaps a little bit better and help you come up with ideas on how to bridge the data, right? So you're not expected to guess what those gaps are and fill them out yourself, but make an educated guess. Make some predictions around the data that you do have. How would the data that you have predict and simulate the data that you don't have or the future? A bad example would be delaying a decision until you have all the data in the world. Or just as bad is essentially making a decision based on super anecdotal data points without seeking for the broader context, without seeking for more data. So bias for action, I think we kind of talked through most of it. The concept of two-way door, use it when you can. When you can't, then refer back to sort of what is the right a lot. And a good example for bias for action is a calculated risk that you have taken where speed was critical. So a good example for that is essentially shutting down a system that to prevent a bad customer experience while figuring out what the issue is and how to fix it. And a bad example would be launching a feature really quickly without it meeting the MLP. It's really funny. I have the exact example that I just talked about. That's a really good example. And sort of in the context of the sort of how to product manage your career development, I think that, that concept of two-way door, you can also use that in your sort of career development experience and decisions the same way I did, I think, a few times, essentially thinking through what steps and what decisions in your career are two-way doors, what decisions and steps in your career are one-way door. For example, if I'm right now at Amazon and I started in the retail business, moving into product management was a pretty low risk, right? I'm at the same company. I'm not really losing anything. I can always change back. I can always move to another role at Amazon versus if I now want to become a lawyer and quit Amazon and start law school, that's a pretty big one-way decision. It's going to take me time and effort and money to go back and reverse my decision. And I think, by the way, an MBA is a really good way to do that. Chicago Booth specifically. Nope. Insist on the highest standards. So this one is really be relentless about having high standards, right? If you as a PM, if you don't insist on the highest standards, probably no one else on your team will. Your tech team probably won't. Your QA team probably won't. Your UX team probably won't. So it's really, really up to you, and it is your responsibility to insist on the highest standards and communicate them. And then continuously raise the bar. That's a concept that we've talked about. It sounds a little bit like maybe it contradicts bias for action, right? Because how can you be biased for action and really, really try to like deliver something quickly and out the door and deliver results if you need to insist on the highest standards? So if we go back to sort of the previous example of a time when you refuse to compromise your standards around quality, then launching a feature, launching a feature too quickly without it meeting the bar, that would be a bad example. A good example would be not launching. So there's, there's that balance between the two. Deliver results. So this one sounds pretty obvious, but I think it's a little bit more nuanced than it is, right? Like deliver results. Yeah, I know I need to just meet the deadline. But a few things I want to point out here is, first of all, it's focused. Focus on the key inputs. You can't do everything. You can't deliver all the different requirements to all the different customers and do everything really, really great. You need to really focus and quickly identify what is really, really urgent, what is really, really painful for your customers. The second thing is the obvious one, right? Deliver quality and speed. Just delivering anything is really not enough. And then the last thing is overcome setbacks. So really problem solve your way into a solution. This is really about, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. You should be the owner of the solution. As a good product manager, at the end of the day, you either deliver or you don't deliver. It doesn't matter if you had churn on your tech team or if the product was being handed over to you. You need to figure out a solution and deliver results despite setbacks. So a good example for that would be thinking about examples where you had significant and unanticipated obstacles to overcome in achieving a goal. So a good example would be, again, focus on the key goal, strip out everything else. For example, if it's a software product, right, you can focus on the key deliverables, and everything else that is nice to have or is not super urgent to be delivered today can be developed and launched in the next phase. A bad example would be changing the timeline without defining the key deliverables, or changing the key deliverables without really understanding what your customers are looking for. I do want to, I just thought about this, and I didn't say this before, but the examples that I'm giving are from product management, but the beauty about this, and I think in general, again, like the concept of like a general athlete at Amazon and sort of using this as a language to different roles and products, is the fact that you can think of it doesn't matter what your background is, you can think of examples where you delivered results and you met and exceeded these leadership principles. So that's what it's really about. And in terms of career development, again, I'd use the sort of focus on key inputs and don't try to do everything, right? If you try to interview with 20 companies or are looking to pick up 10 new skills, you're probably going to fail. Try to focus on what is really important for you now, and don't settle on your goals. Think big. Also, one of those things that, it's pretty obvious and straightforward. But thinking big, in my mind, is, and also what this alludes to, is about being bold and different, right? So bigger is not necessarily better. It's really about going above and beyond the immediate functionalities and the things that you do every day. And the second thing here is really about create and communicate, right? It's not enough for you to just have a really great idea if you can't create something, build something, and if you can't bring other people along with you on your journey and inspire them to believe in that idea as well. And I think the more senior that you get, this would become increasingly more important because, and especially if you think of, the concept also of ownership, if you only limit yourself to deliver what is being asked from you and not increasingly think of new and innovative ways to cater to your product's needs, then you're continue to be someone who is just being told what to do instead of someone who actually can come up with really, really good ideas and have other people join to support them. Yeah, I wanted to give like a really bad example of like an answer that I got in an interview when I asked about a time that you worked on something on an initiative and saw an opportunity to do something much bigger than the initial focus. And then the answer would be, well, I knew that if we just call like 200 more customers, we would really, really grow the business. And then the question I asked, well, how are you going to do that? And the answer was, well, we would just hire 20 more people. Wrong answer. Wrong answer. I won't say anymore. The other thing I wanted to say is also in the context of career development is really the concept of like thinking bold, thinking different, not trying to compete with people for the same projects or for the same titles, for the same scopes of opportunities. Look in areas where other people are not looking, right? Companies that maybe some of you guys are, have a lot of friends that are interviewing for the same companies. I mean, that's great. But what about the companies that your friends are not, looking at? What about the projects that no one is picking up? What about this process that everyone knows really, really suck and not doing anything about? So try and look for those opportunities. Be different, not be try to be better per se. Dive deep. One of my favorites. Staying connected to the details. Operating at a high level. I think a lot of people don't understand it is not going to get you to the root cause. Not going to help you fix the problem. Look for data and metrics, and use anecdotes to guide you to go and do research, not to make a decision. Right? So again, if you have a customer calling into a service center and saying, or emailing you saying, this and this went really, really wrong. I want a compensation. I mean, yeah, you could and probably should maybe give them a refund, maybe give them a coupon, make their day better. But that's just very, very high level. What a good product manager would do is actually try and understand a root cause, what the problem is, dive into the details, understand the patterns and what other customers are experiencing, and whether there's a bigger fix, a bigger problem that you need to think about. The other thing here is like no task is beneath them. Don't be too proud to roll up your sleeve and lead really by doing. Earn trust. Earn trust. But number one is really listen. Number two is speak candidly and be self-critical and admit your mistakes, learn from them, benchmark yourselves against other people who are better from you and that you can learn from. You'd be surprised how many people you would sit in front of them in an interview and you would ask, well, do you think you could have done anything differently? And I think in just about any situation, you could probably think of something that you learned from it and that you could have done differently, better, faster, think about before. But so many people would say, no, I think I really nailed it. Could be true sometimes, but I think rarely the case. And the third one is really treat others respectfully. I think that goes without saying. For that is a question about like having a tough or critical piece of feedback that you received. So I'll give you one of feedback pieces that I got was not essentially listening to my customer needs and expecting them to adopt my solution instead. So one of my internal stakeholders, I developed this product and they weren't using it correctly. And they came back with all these questions and they were like complaining, well, we don't have this and we don't have that. And I kept on insisting, well, this is where you get this data point from. This is why this works this way. Like, it just became essentially like a back and forth instead of me, just being, self-critical for a second and thinking through, well, if they have so many questions and so many pushbacks and this is not consistently not working, then what can I be doing differently as a product manager? What is that product missing that I need to do? A bad example of questions like that. Well, I actually don't have it, but I'm sure you can guys think of. I'm just too perfect. I strive for perfection, and that really hurts my career. From a just in general career development standpoint, and this actually takes practice. Is always ask for feedback, like real-time feedback whenever you have the chance. Don't even leave it to do you have feedback for me? Because a lot of people are also uncomfortable to give feedback. So it's not like, do you have feedback for me? It's, can you tell me one thing I did really great in this meeting and one thing I really sucked at? Just get that feedback. It's gonna make you grow so much better. And have backbone, disagree and commit. I think that this one also a little bit contradicts, earn trust, right? There's a trade-off. There's a balance there between when do you push and you disagree, and when do you try to earn trust and establish trust with the stakeholders that you're working with. So key things here is respectfully challenge direction, right? Find a way to disagree without being nasty, even when you're uncomfortable. Right? So it's not just about disagreeing when someone's asking for your opinion. Even if no one's asking for your opinion and you disagree, raise your hand and also have conviction, right? If you disagree, you should come prepared with reasons why you disagree, data why you disagree, something more than just, your opinion. And then obviously, once a decision is determined, commit wholly, right? Don't sit with a sour face at the corner of the meeting and just be really, really mad because your recommendation did not go through. If the alternative recommendation gets accepted, embrace that and make sure that you do everything that you can to make it a success. So again, that sort of push and pull play, I think if you do it right, then people would start to really appreciate the opportunities that you push, because they know you push when you need to push. You understand the context. You're going to disagree on things that are that you have a reason to disagree, that are important. And when not, you're going to really try and create trust, even if you don't agree and it's not super, super critical, or you don't have a really, really good reason to disagree. So I think it's a fine balance. And I think an interesting thing here, which I don't know if people realize, is that you're going to get evaluated on this leadership principles in interviews, even if you don't realize it, right? You don't need to be asked a commit and disagree question to really demonstrate whether or not you have it. For example, if you're telling a story and your interviewer keeps pushing for data or questions or trying to poke holes at your story. By the way, this is the general Amazon interview experience, so don't take it personal. But also, they might be evaluating your commit and disagree to see whether or not you have conviction and whether or not you can have a backbone when dealing with your interviewer. So be mindful of that. And obviously, when you do have backbone and you disagree, do that respectfully and thoughtfully in your interview. We've had those too. And almost no, we have 3 more. Learn and be curious. Learn, that's simple. Don't assume you have all the answers. And genuine curiosity will bring you new approaches and perspectives later on. A good question for that is a time you realize you need a deeper level of subject matter expertise to do your job well, right? So the way to do that is talking to subject matter experts, researching online, interviewing customers, shadowing other people to see how they're doing their job. A bad example would be using a third-party research firm or delegating tasks to someone else who knows more than you. I think in a lot of companies and contexts, you are actually expected to go and use a third-party research firm or delegate to someone else. I think specifically at Amazon, rarely would it be taken well if you ask your manager to have a McKinsey or a whatever research firm. I want to understand the market. You want to understand the market? Go do the legwork. Understand the market. And then a good example for that in like your personal career development life is, for Learn and Be Curious, is like don't coffee chat and network just when you need something from someone. Like if you continue to always expand your network, expand your skills, and just genuinely be learning and being curious about things that you don't know, you're going to find your ways into really, really cool ideas and people that you never even knew that interested you. And I don't know. I think that's a good one. And then Frugality. It's almost the last, and I think this one is actually really underrated because frugality it's not really sexy. But it's really doing more with less in situations where a lot of people actually try to do less with more. So I think it's a really also great driver for innovation. If you think about it, when you're trying to automate things or trying to find ways to deliver more with less, that really makes you stop and think, what in this existing process, what is in this existing world of mine is unnecessarily inefficient? What can I cut back and still find a way, creative way, to deliver and to create value? So I think this one is super underrated. Yep. And then this one is the last one, hire and develop the best. I think it's really interesting because I think a lot of managers at Amazon and outside of Amazon, and it's natural to think that your peers or your directs are a competition in a way. But I think a lot of the times it's so hard for companies to retain and develop and hire good talent. So if you can be an asset in developing and coaching people, I think that would make you an asset for the company, and you can always learn from those people as well. So that's a short one. And then before we end, some interview tips as it relates to the leadership principle. So do touch on your resume. Don't use it in every single bullet point. Mention in the interviews. Map your stories to leadership principles, right? Come prepared to answer questions about leadership principles. And by the way, this again, I don't think only applies to Amazon. And then focus on key LPs for your role, right? Like if you're coming in as an IC product manager, you're probably not going to get questions on hire and develop the best. Don't come unprepared. Like don't think that you're not going to get asked these questions. You are for sure going to get asked these questions. Don't overdo it, and every other word is going to be a leadership principle. And also, don't be generic. Don't give an answer of like, yeah, I really like how Amazon is with customer obsession. That's great, and don't ask what LP is being evaluated.